Hello, thank you for joining this conversation between myself, Chris, and Vice President of Marketing for Awin, an affiliate marketing company, Lisa Maynard. There's a lot of things I loved about this conversation. The main one, if I had to choose, would really be the comments around communication, actually. It was the thread that ran through a lot of the topics we dived into. Another thing I really loved was actually how deep and specific we got into some of the things that worked well for Lisa in her career and also for her organization. So if I pick out a couple of those, the idea of senior leadership peer groups. So we know that senior leaders are busy, under pressure, difficult to reach at times, particularly difficult to help or have helped champion mental health and performance from the top. But Lisa really got into this idea of setting the tone from the top of the organization. And an idea that I really liked was actually treating leaders as a group as opposed to individuals that have a lot of weight on their shoulders. So peer support groups at senior leadership level is one example. A lot of communication back and forth between leaders and employees and teammates when it comes to listening through tools like Peakon, for example, or just one-on-one conversations, but also the idea of comms out from within the organization, and actually the idea of streamlining comms and deleting some stuff and information that's being sent to employees being really powerful, because we all know how overloaded we can be. So we got into some real specifics here. I think communication for me was one of the threads running through everything, but I'll let you decide what to take from it yourself. Enjoy. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the organization and team side of things, I wonder if we could just start off with a quick introduction and then getting into the more personal side. So Lisa, if you could just share a bit about who you are and what you do to kick us off.
Sure.
Amazing.
So I'm the VP of marketing for a company called Awin. So we're the largest affiliate and partnership marketing platform in the world. I've been in the company for just over 16 years now. So I've been through lots of professional changes, big mergers, big acquisitions, as well as a lot of personal changes. And I guess the biggest part that I'm excited about for this conversation in terms of personal life and work life is just being a really big advocate for employee well-being in the workplace, trying to really champion flexible working, making sure that everyone has a healthy work-life balance, and accommodating flexible schedules.
So we'll dive into flexibility and work-life balance as well in a bit, but perhaps to start, as I hinted at, yourself as a senior leader of a big team at a big organization, how do you manage your own mental health and performance?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think a lot of it is, you need to lead from the top, right? It's one thing to tell people that you want them to focus on their own well-being, but if you're not emulating that yourself, it's really difficult. So I manage a team. I've got a team of about 45 marketers at Awin, and I manage it really well. I think personally, I've got a small child at home, so if it means I need to do school runs, I log off. Make sure I log off at that time. I give people notice that I'm doing that. And if it means that I need to log on a little bit later to finish up any work, then I'll do that. So I'm a big advocate of having and encouraging people to build their schedules around what works best for their lifestyle. And the kind of mantra that I have is, you know what your deadlines are, you know what the work is, and it's not going to do itself. So as long as you're comfortable with getting everything done at the timeline it needs to be done, then it doesn't really matter if you're sitting at your desk 9 to 5. I think that's quite an archaic way of working these days. So I think it's really important that people can focus on having that flexibility, being really trusted and autonomous with their time. And in doing so, I try and build things into my day to be able to step away from the computer as much as possible. I've got a really bad back, so if I'm sitting for too long, inevitably my legs go numb. So I try and get up, have a little walk. I've recently taken up piano. So on a Wednesday during my lunch hour, I go and play piano for an hour, which really makes you switch off from work, because if you are trying to play the piano and you're focusing on anything else, you play terribly. So it's a really nice way of completely switching off your brain to being able to just focus in the moment on whatever it is that you're wanting to do, whether it's some sort of physical activity, some sort of mental activity. And then I feel like I come back even more refreshed, ready to work in the afternoon. So those are the sort of things I do.
Are they habits that you've had for a long time? I'm just interested, I suppose, because a lot of people I know would probably love to have a leader that talks about flexibility and balance and plays piano on a Wednesday and finishes at the times that work for her. So I'm just wondering, are these things that you've had in place ever since you became a leader, or are they things that you learned through experience and perhaps being a little bit closer to that survive end of the continuum or being stressed in moments in your career?
Sure. It's a great question. I think it's definitely things I've evolved over time. When you first move into a leadership role, you've got a lot to prove because the business has trusted you to be a leader. So you want to move in and be able to prove that you are a strong leader and that you're leading a team to deliver. So I think it's been more of a gradual thing in terms of being like, sure, log on whenever suits you kind of thing. That wasn't an immediate thing. I think a lot of it was around learning on my own around what works best for me and how I'm going to be the most effective leader is if I'm taking regular breaks throughout the day. I'm getting up, I'm stretching my legs. I'm feeling like I've not been in back to back to back meetings, which, as you know, especially in a hybrid working kind of post COVID environment, we tend to do that, right? You used to be, if you were in the office, you'd get that 5-minute break of walking from one meeting room to another. You'd get yourself a glass of water, a cup of coffee or whatever. Very often now, when you have back to back, you're just sitting for hours on end. So really trying to encourage people to book shorter meetings, rather than the default being an hour, put it in place for 30 minutes or 25 to give you that little buffer of time so you can get up and stretch your legs. So I would say a lot of the things that that I do myself and that I've instilled in the team are things that I learned over time gradually. It also helps that Awin is a great company that really champions flexibility as well. So we work on something called Flexi Week, where we're really encouraging people to be able to take the time that they need, whether it's family time, whether it's again activities outside of work. We have an example where one of our managing directors wanted to do an MBA while being a managing director of our biggest market, and we really encouraged her to be able to take the time out that she needed to do that and supported her in doing that. So I think a lot of it is culture from the top, not just the board has to live and breathe that as well. And I think it makes it a lot easier for people to feel comfortable in those situations, knowing that it's being championed from the top.
And I suppose I'm jumping to this conclusion with regards to the board and the organization, but it sounds like it took you a while to build those habits and they developed over time. And I guess it wasn't always that case for Awin, as if we just extrapolate out to any other organization, it takes a while and a bit of a journey to get to a good place, I think, where we describe it as thriving. So I know from having worked with you before that you're in close communication with the top of the company. And I think it's interesting that you hint at the senior leadership piece as well, and it's starting top down. So I'm just interested to dig into how you have progressed from, for example, prior to your role at the moment. So prior to being in charge of the marketing team and having 45 direct reports, that wasn't always the case. You were at one point a manager of a few people and then 10 people and double figures, etc. So
sure,
if you could just paint the picture a little bit of how you've kind of built through that. And in particular, I'd be interested in any specific moments or stories or examples that come to mind where you had to make a choice to lead this way.
Yeah. So when I first started at Awin, I won't go too far back, as it's 16 years and we'll be here all day. But when I first, let's say, moved into the marketing team, we were quite a small team and we were just looking after the UK. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we've done a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and the company has grown exponentially. And with that, the marketing team has grown. And it was about 6 years ago that we centralized marketing. What that means is that rather than having dedicated marketing managers in every region that reported to their managing director in region, we decided to centralize all of them and make them all one big marketing team, and they reported into me as a function, let's say. And with that, you then had a lot of nuances with different types of culture, different ways of communicating. So that was really, for me, the eye-opening moment of trying to be like, this is really important that I get this leadership piece right, because these are all people that were experienced marketers that had never worked with me before. They may have worked with me on a project basis, but never longer term in terms of like you're, now having to follow, let's say, rules or guidelines or ways of working that I had put in with my immediate team in the UK. So it was really taking a lot of time to stop, to listen, to learn what makes people tick, what do they enjoy, what are their best ways of working, really getting a feel for how people work best. You have some people that are night owls that they would much rather log in a bit later in the day, and they're happy to work till 8 o'clock at night. And there's a benefit in that, right? We're a global company. We've got people in Australia, we've got people in Brazil, we've got people in the US. So having people work a bit later, if you're based in London, is actually a benefit to us. So rather than seeing it as you're not logging in till 11 in the morning, I look at it as great. You're the one that's dealing with things at 9 o'clock at night when I don't have to. So I think there's a benefit of giving people, again, when you give that trust and that autonomy and saying, how do you work best? What works best for you? I want to make sure that I'm getting the most out of you and that you're getting the most support from me. in being able to help you and nurture you to do a good job. And again, deadlines aren't going to do themselves. The work isn't going to do itself. So as long as you're meeting those deadlines and you're able to achieve being effective and the things we set out to do, I don't really mind what sort of flexible kind of schedule you create for yourself.
I'd love to dig into the results and impact you feel that's had as well within the team and in terms of performance. But before we do, if we just park that thought, how did you actually find out what people's working preferences were? Were these conversations that you had one-on-one? Did it start with the UK team? And then how did you do that as a senior leader for 45 people?
Some of it was one-on-one conversations, especially with my immediate direct reports. So that my management layer, let's say, where they're looking after significantly more people in market. So it was just getting a real feel for what their needs were and what their desires were when it came to work. And a lot of that was conversation based. We also use something as a business called Peakon. So it's like for employee satisfaction. And that's a great tool because it's anonymous. It's company wide, but you can filter down to marketing. So I can see all the responses that I know come from within those 45 people in marketing without having a name attached to it. And it's great because we ask a lot of very targeted questions about, how people feel about the work-life balance. Do you feel that Awin is championing that? Do you feel that your direct line manager is championing that? Do you feel that if you needed to take time out for work for a personal issue, that would be supported? So there's loads of questions that we ask, and we really want the answers to them. And because it's anonymous and everything is kind of you grade it on a scale of 1 to 10, but there's always an open field where we encourage people to write comments. And 9 times out of 10 people are very happy to share those thoughts. And I don't know if it's because they feel safe behind the anonymity of it. But people are very happy to share, where they do or where they don't feel supported. And I think that a lot can be learned from that. So very often what I do is I'll take those results, I'll share them with my management team. And then what we'll try and do is put things in place to make people feel more supported. So some examples were, during COVID. And again, I know that was an extreme example because everybody was in lockdown and there was no one in the office, but we tried to create these like coffee hours where everyone would log in and no work chat was happening. It was all just log in and talk about how you're feeling, what's going on in your personal life. Is anybody, you getting out and getting some fresh air? Just more a general conversation about how things are going. And we were really strict with them in the beginning and it was great. And people were always dialing in. You'd get the whole team, kind of everyone would have their coffee or their tea chatting about challenges they were having or how they were feeling or things like that. Obviously, as COVID dragged on and on and on, people were like, actually, I'm too busy for that. Or instead of using this coffee hour, I'm actually going to go out and get some fresh air. So I'm not going to dial in. And that was great because then we canceled them because it was like, well, people are happy to just be honest about saying, this isn't useful for me. I'd rather just, if I've got an extra 20 minutes, I don't want to be on a call talking about how I'm feeling. I want to go out and get some fresh air, or I want to go hit the gym or do a yoga session or whatever. So yeah, a lot of it is, open communication, allowing people to share how they're feeling, whether it's verbally or through anonymous surveys, I think have worked really, really well for us.
And then I won't ask for specific responses and what people have said in that, but I do know that obviously working in a fast-paced industry and it's ultimately you're leading a team which has performance targets attached to it as well. So
of course,
in a team, an organization, an industry where creativity is important, performance is important, but then so too you're managing to balance mental health alongside that. Like how are you doing that in terms of communicating the results you get back from surveys and the actions that you're going to take in response to them? And even beyond that, even if we think beyond Peakon and beyond like your one-on-one conversations, like how do you balance those things and make sure that you've got mental health and performance as opposed to just one of them?
I think, look, we'd be kidding ourselves if we think that you can have a company that performs at a really, really high rate without having some sort of focus on well-being, unless you're just paying them billions, unless it's a team that's making so much money that it's ingrained in their brain that it doesn't matter how they feel. They're just doing that. I think if we're being really honest with ourselves, you have to remember that no matter what, we just work in marketing. It's kind of like the mantra that I say, like, I know that we'll have really stressful times, like you mentioned, performance and targets and all of that. And it's just reminding ourselves that while we have a really important job to do, it is just a job, and that your own well-being, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever it is always going to be more important than the job. And I really believe that. And I think that Awin as a company really believes that. And I think that as long as you instill that in your people, that if you're, I'll have people sometimes that are like, oh, I feel terrible today, but I didn't want to call in sick. And I'm like, log off right now. I don't want you here because you're doing something that isn't going to be healthy for you. And actually, I'm not going to get that much out of you if all you're thinking, if you have a high fever and you're coughing and sputtering, you're not thinking and focused about what we're talking about. All you're thinking is, oh, I can't wait to get off this call and lay down. I'd rather you just go lay down. We don't have to be martyrs here. And I think it takes a lot for people to feel okay with doing that. Oh my gosh, I'm so busy. I had 4 meetings. I didn't want to let anybody down. And it is a constant reminder of like, you have to prioritize yourself and the company second. And that performance will come because of it. If you have people that feel well, they perform well. They're inevitably going to perform better if they feel supported and if they feel like they're able to give their best.
Is that something you've seen then, like it actively in the numbers that come out for Awin?
Yeah. So funnily enough, because when we launched our Flexi Week, and again, it was a big deal for us to be able to do that, we were a little bit concerned about how clients would react to it. And actually what we've seen, and I won't be able to share any specific data on it, but, we've seen significant improvements in our NPS scores because of it. And, people do feel the benefit of that, and our clients feel it as well. We make sure that we always have a team working. Everyone is very committed to being available for customers. But it just means that it might be a different person that you're speaking to because you're not having, we're giving people that flexibility to be able to work on hours that support their lifestyle. So we get a lot of customer feedback through NPS scores. We also run other surveys, specific client surveys throughout the year. But again, that Pecan score speaks volumes with it, and overall company performance. We're a growing business, we're a thriving business. So that speaks volumes, in and of itself.
What do you, we'll come back to the survive, thrive piece because I'd be interested to get your read on the organization as a whole. But before doing that, what if it doesn't quite work? So we've spoken a lot about trust and autonomy and balance. And I guess there's always going to be a point where in certain situations, it might not quite work. It might be an individual employee's performance isn't where we need it to be, or
Sure.
It might be that it just doesn't quite play out as we plan it. So have there been any instances of that, not going into details? And then how do you navigate that as a senior leader?
It's a great question, and it's really tricky because, we have had situations where people, they actually prefer to be in an office 5 days a week, and they prefer to not have remote working, and they prefer to work in that way, very structured, because they don't trust themselves outside of work. If you let them be at home on a beautiful day like we have today, they're like, "Ooh, I don't really want to work." So we have had situations like that where it was clear that people weren't, let's say, doing what they should be doing. And again, it just becomes an open conversation. I'm seeing that you're not really as available as you should be in core hours, or you're not that responsive at all, sort of thing. What's going on for you? And rather than assuming the worst, I try and come at it again, assuming positive intent. Is there something else going on for you that's a reason why you're not pulling your weight, not meeting deadlines, not being as communicative or available? And and very often, thankfully, again, because we do have such an open and honest way of working, sometimes we will get people that will just say, actually, you know what, it was just one of those days where I needed almost like what you used to call a duvet day. I wasn't sick, I just needed a day. And sometimes by opening those lines of communication, you can say, okay, great, take your day, but listen, we can't make a habit of this. And if there's things that I can do to help, better support you, then I need to be able to do that. For a while, and some teams put in things where they'll say, right, every week, 1 day a week, we want everybody to come into the office together. We haven't put things in, that kind of stringently in my team. But what we do have is we have a group chat for everyone that's based in the UK, and it'll be whoever knows that they're going in will comment on. They're like, hey, I'm going to be in on Thursday, and someone else will go, oh, actually, if you're going to be in, I'll come in. And then before you know it, you've got 20 people in the UK, and then we all try and go out for lunch together. So we try and kind of instill that culture, and it's really nice. One example that you might find really interesting was I had this guy, a young guy, who was brilliant. He was so effective, really good at his job, but it was pretty much wholly remote because he lived a bit further out, and he resigned off his own back because he's like, I feel like I need to be around people. I feel like I need that buzz of being in an office. And he said, I come in more often, even though I'm further away, and very often it's quiet in the office. And so that was actually what made us create this chat for everybody that's based in the UK. So like if you're coming in, let people know you're coming in, because nobody wants to be the only one in the office. So it's made it a way of it. That was something that sparked us to have that. So rather than, because I was gutted, I was like, what if I put in place something to make everyone come? And he was like, no, it wasn't that. But it was such a shame to lose, talent over something that's actually a very warranted reason. Like, I just need to be around people. I need the buzz of peeking over a desk and asking a question. And obviously it's a very different working culture now, with a hybrid model. So it wasn't something we were able to give on a day-to-day basis. But I think there's different ways that you can manage that. I think, again, the main thing is around how you communicate with people, and making sure that that no matter what they say, they're not going to be punished for that response. It's an open dialogue, and trying to really get to the bottom of what's going on for them.
I love that piece. It comes back to trust, which you shared at the beginning. And I also really like the idea of positive intent and asking and assuming good things before thinking, oh, this is a problem. Why aren't we here when we should be here?
Exactly.
So I think just building that out, we've heard a little bit about Awin, but for the marketing industry more broadly, if we say that survive is this end of the continuum, it's a 1 out of 5. It's where people are burnt out, it's stressed, people don't want to turn up to work, and staff retention is low, performance is low. And a 5 is thriving. So burnout doesn't exist. Performance is high and sustainable, and retention is high and sustainable because people want to be part of the team and they want to come to work, like your colleague in that example you shared. Where do you see, this could just be from your own personal experience, talking with friends, talking with other leaders, where do you see the industry as a whole on that 1 to 5 survive to thrive continuum?
It's such a good question. It's such a tricky balance to find. So I have a few friends that work agency side. So specifically I won't mention the names of them, but creative agencies. And they don't have any of the flexibility that we have. And it is very much like, if you're not at your desk at 9 o'clock, you're hearing whispers of people going, oh, so-and-so is out late, or so-and-so, that sort of thing. It's like you're being talked about and it sort of thing. She will work the most ridiculous hours. I mean, it's sort of the kind of thing at 5:30, you're sort of looking around to see who's going to be the first one to get up. And before you know it, it's 8 p.m. and there's still half the company in the office. And she has said that that's very much the culture that she has, working on an agency side. And so I think there's still a long way to go when you're looking at marketing, creative, brand, all of these different roles that would fall into what I would call, typically think of as a marketing function. I think there's some companies that are doing things in sort of the baby steps of it, like we did, where you kind of launch little initiatives piece by piece. And there are some that are really nailing it and getting it right. And again, I won't mention specific companies, but a very well-known social platform that one of my closest friends works for, and they give everyone free breakfast every day. It's like, if you come into the office, you get a free breakfast. They have an in-house gym. They do classes over lunch period. So they actively encourage people to, come have your lunch, go do a workout. And I think that's fantastic. And I think I was just like, when she was talking about it, and she's just come back from maternity leave, and she was like, it's great because I'm only in the office 3 days a week, but the days I'm in, I can squeeze in a workout without having to leave the building. So I think that's obviously the very much the thrive end of it, where, the agency friend I was talking about was very much that survive element. And, they're only doing themselves a disservice. I mean, my biggest piece of advice with it would be that you have to find that balance. And it is a balance, right? I'm certainly not encouraging flexibility for the sake of it and well-being for the sake of it if people aren't performing. Obviously, you need to have that performance element. People have to be delivering results in order for you to allow those sort of initiatives. But if they are allowing it, it's almost like a punishment not to encourage them to have time for themselves, have time for their families, take time out to enjoy hobbies or passions or things that are going to continue to make them and the business thrive.
So how, if we shift gears slightly into your role as a senior leader and any other senior leaders you work with and any friends that you have that set the tone or are responsible for setting the tone from the top, as you describe it, how do you do that? I know it's a broad question and you've covered some of the ways that you do it personally, but what role do you see senior leaders as actually having to play with regards to mental health and performance of organizations, whether they be small or large?
I think senior leaders they have the biggest role to play, right? If you're not leading by example, if you're working, ridiculous hours and you're constantly in the office and you're not encouraging that, it's going to be very difficult for people below you to follow, right? They're not gonna be the want to be the first ones to say, hey, have you thought about flexible working, or how about we start at 10 and finish at 6? Those sorts of things are not going to happen if you're not leading by example. And I think having that senior leader sort of peer group where you can bounce ideas with each other of like, is anyone else finding that within the team there's a little bit of burnout, or there people are feeling, really overwhelmed or anything like that? And I think that's where you have those conversations, and they have to come from the top. And not everyone's going to be in agreement with it, right? Sometimes when you have the finance people that are really just number crunching, they're a bit like, we don't need to have as much flexibility. And I think that's okay. It's okay to have those difference of opinions, but that's where the best conversations happen. But I think the senior leaders in every organization are the ones that have to drive this, because if you're relying on middle management or just new employees through the door, they might not have the confidence to have those conversations, right? They need to feel safe. They need to feel supported. And if their leaders are not showing that and displaying that in their own actions, it's near on impossible to get that implemented. I would also say that if you have a HR team or people and culture, as we have at Awin, leverage them, right? Use their expertise. We have a great people and culture team as part of Awin that, again, speak to the senior leaders and try and really understand what are the things that we can nurture, what are the things that we can put in place to better support people to speak up, so through different surveys, but also to share the positive effects of the things that we are putting in place so that we can do more of those and double down on those activities that work really well. And so I think the senior leaders, it has to come from them.
There's a couple of points I'd like to pick up on that on there. One is around the senior leader peer group. I think that's a really fascinating idea, because when you think about senior leader, you quite often think of perhaps like a lonely role, someone responsible for a lot of others and maybe even with a lot of pressure on their shoulders. Well, not even probably, Yep. Definitely. And so I'd really love to dig into the senior leader group point, and then the second one I'll come on to in a moment.
So we have a few different groups like this, but again, I think a lot of it is down to how you communicate. So we use Teams channel, different Teams channels. So we have a Teams channel that's for like all, it's called like the commercial leadership team. So it's all the leaders that are responsible for commercial parts of the organization. We have a monthly catch up where we talk mostly about business topics. How are things performing? What are the biggest campaigns? What are the different, pain points and challenges and things like that? But we also use it as an opportunity to talk about staff, how staff are doing, what's working, what isn't, what are churn levels? Are there things that we need to put in place? So it's a nice opportunity to be able to do that. And on top of it being a monthly call, we also then use the Teams channel for sort of like asynchronous chat. So, people will post things like, oh, I saw this really interesting article about so-and-so, and it will spark a topic of discussion or debate or something like that. I think it's really important. One, it's nice to feel like you're not alone with these things, and being able to bounce ideas off each other. But it's a nice way to understand that, some of the challenges I might be facing might be exactly the same as someone else in a totally different aspect of the business. As part of that, we have the global operations, which look after our tech departments, for example. They're part of that as well. And so although it's not, totally different team, totally different remit and responsibilities, interesting to have some of the similar challenges. So I think it's a nice way for us to be able to facilitate those conversations.
Have you really joined forces with a couple of other senior leaders? Have you helped other senior leaders see things differently? I'm just wondering, how do we spark a passion and interest or beliefs around mental health and performance in perhaps some leaders that aren't coming from such a natural place with such a positive outlook on this stuff?
It's so funny because I think that everyone that has children, especially if you have small children, you have a very different mindset, because you understand, like, the pressures of, well, I can't leave my kid on the side of the road. I have to go collect them at 3:00, right? School finishes at 3:00. So you force yourself. You might come from, again, I've been in the company 16 years. There were years where I would never dream about leaving the office at 3:00 or logging off at 3:00 ever. I'm forced to do that now because I have a child that I need to collect. So, and in doing so, it has totally changed my perception on it. So I think that I find that with some of the different leaders that I speak to, those that have children have a very similar mindset, and they're all in the same camp where there's no longer a guilt about it. It's just well, I have to log off at 3 because I have to go get my kid. And I might log on later today, I might not, but no matter what, the work will get done. Because if I don't log on later tonight, I'm going to have to log on early tomorrow or later tomorrow. So it comes back again to finding schedules that work for you. And there are a few people, leaders in my org that don't have kids, and I think they feel a guilt about doing that because they don't have children. And I'm like, it's exactly the same, whether it's a child or not. If you're just, like I was talking about with my piano lesson, just take the hour. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Just, it shouldn't be that people with children have extraordinary benefit of this. It's like, take the hour, go to the gym, play the piano, play the guitar, go for a walk, call your mom, whatever. Take the time to stop work in the middle of a work day. Because I really firmly believe that sitting and trying to work for 8 hours straight is completely counterproductive. Your brain is going to be fried by 3 o'clock anyway. So you may as well take the time, do the thing, and then come back to it, because you'll just find that you're much more refreshed. I find that I do some of my best work at 8 o'clock at night. My daughter goes to bed at 7. I log on at 8. In that hour from 8 to 9, 9:30, it feels like I've worked a whole work day. No one's calling me. I have no meetings. It's peace and quiet. And you can just get a load of work done if you just give yourself the space to do that. And I think a lot of it is people just, there's a fear, right? There's a fear of, oh, am I going to, is this going to be okay? Or am I going to set a precedent that the business doesn't want? And again, it's all down to communication. It's all down to leading by example. And it's all down to trialing things and seeing what works.
I like the idea of experimenting and trialing and not having a perfect first time. So if there's one thing that you think Awin's done well to get you into a space where you can talk about all of these examples, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, one thing. I think the leading from the top with Flexi Week has been huge. I think this idea of saying, look, we trust you. We want you to feel autonomous. We want you to feel supported. We really want you to be able to work around a schedule that works for you, to be able to be as effective and productive as possible. And we're trusting you to be able to do that. I think it's huge. And I think it really speaks volumes of the trust that they put in us, and not just in everybody, but especially the trust they put in leaders, because we're the ones that have to keep track of all of that. So I would say that's been a total game changer for how we work.
Thank you, Lisa. My final question on a more personal level. We know you play the piano. We know you've got a daughter. If there was one thing, tool, resource that's really helped you manage your own mental health and performance within the workplace or more broadly in life, what would it be?
Fresh air and sunlight. getting out and walking. It's one thing I've started doing every single morning. I walk first thing in the morning, and it totally sets you up. Even all through winter, I bundle up, earmuffs on, the whole shebang, get some fresh air as much as you possibly can. It actually is a total game changer in your day. I think there's one of my heads of department in my team, and she vehemently takes her hour lunch break. She eats for 20 minutes of it, and then she goes out and has a walk every day at lunch, rain or shine. And she comes back and she says she just feels totally reinvigorated to take on the rest of the day. And there's a reason that in the UK they tell us to take vitamin D supplements. It's because we don't get enough of that. So I would say as much as you can possibly be outside in nature is it's a game changer.
I love that. On that note, we'll wrap it up and maybe go for a little walk and a break from the screen.
Love it. Thanks so much, Chris.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.